All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for yet another episode of Dr.Podcast. Today, you're in for a real treat because we have the recently awarded Dr. Nguyen with us here today. So welcome to the show, Johnny.
Thank you.
First of all, we just want to kind of just have you talk a little bit about your background and what inspired you originally to pursue your doctoral degree.
It's really funny that you asked that because initially I didn't grow up wanting to pursue like academia and get a PhD, right?
Yeah.
I come from a family of a lot of pharmacists. So I have 3 older siblings who went into pharmacy and 2 uncles who also went into pharmacy. And so by the time it got to me, my parents were like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And so I chose at the time to try and pursue medical school. And then I went through all high school and then through about 3/4 of my undergrad, prepping for med school, taking all the courses and, getting the hours and healthcare and stuff like that. When I started to have kind of this, I don't want to say epiphany, but like kind of this uncertainty in where my career is going. But then at that point, I had already TA'd for a lot of classes and then gotten to know some professors. And so my, at the time, it was just the professor that I was TAing for, but who currently, or was previously my PI for my PhD. She reached out to me. She's like, hey, I have money for a grad student next year. Would you be interested in doing education research? And then this was an entirely, complete career shift for me, to consider, but I was, at the time, again, uncertain about where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, and then medical school wasn't that appealing to me.
Right.
And then I was like, I've been enjoying my time TAing a lot. I love interacting with students, love helping them understand things, and so maybe academia is the way to go. And so I was like, yeah, let's try it. Let's go for it. And so I applied. Yeah, and then became her grad student, her first grad student, from my understanding.
Oh wow, okay.
And it took off from there. I never looked back once. I loved every moment of it. Well, maybe not every moment of it, but we'll get to that.
PhDs.
Yeah. We'll get to that later.
I totally resonate with that though too. I started out pre-med actually in chemistry, and then I took a psychology course and like quickly fell in love with it. So I can understand though the medical school, like trajectory and like that's what you thought you wanted to do.
Right. And then so like teaching just became my end goal. And I'm like, well, I know I want to teach. I know I don't want to teach K-12 because that takes an entirely different skill set. I feel like, and an amount of patience a different type of patience that I probably don't have because I remember what I was like, in high school and middle school. And I was like, I want to teach and I want to teach in higher ed. And so a lot of times, most of the time with those positions, you need a PhD, or close to it. So
that's awesome, though. I love that story, though, of like how it got you to where you are today.
Yeah.
So kind of as we were kind of already getting at, so pursuing a PhD is a mixture of like resilience and especially when you're balancing so many things. So research, personal responsibilities, and even teaching, like you were doing in your experience. So how were you able to like manage everything, all of these competing demands? Were there like any strategies you implemented, moments of clarity or lessons that kind of became your like guiding force or guiding light?
Well, I would say with teaching, I never once, because I love teaching, it never once felt like a chore or like something that I had to like overcome. It was just something that I got to do. Like I get to teach today. I get to look forward to teaching this week and stuff like that. So that was completely different. And then personal responsibilities, I got to do those, I guess. Yeah. And then like research, because I had that end goal of teaching in mind, it was always like, do this so that you get to teach in the future. Do this, so you could do all that stuff. And in order to get to that point, or in order to get through those things, I will say that I initially started off as a horrible procrastinator, like a serial procrastinator, like throughout my
Happens.
entire life. And grad school really kind of kicked my butt a little bit and helped me shift my focus
As it
and
does.
attitude on that stuff. And I eventually found out that my cheat to get over that stuff is to make essentially an itemized list of everything that I need to get done. And then, if at all possible, break that itemized list down into more smaller, bite-sized itemized lists, and
Yeah.
just to take everything and make it into a pinpoint task. And that's how I managed that. I guess I would say that there weren't too many times where those separate worlds would like overlap so much that it gets super overbearing. I'd say that there was at the very least some breathing room. Like I would get my teaching out of the way and then all the grading out of the way, and so I'd have time to focus on all of the other stuff.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't pile up too badly for me.
I understand that though too, because like for me too, being at a teaching focused school and teaching during grad school, it was always like my excitement and source of that. So I would always prioritize, right? Like, okay, what am I going to do in the classroom today? All of that. And it would make everything else bearable because you're like, okay, I'm starting with like what I'm passionate about. So
yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so with this, so looking back, right, what's one piece of advice that you like actually wish you would have known prior to starting your PhD program? So we know that like preparation is power, but hindsight, right, is wisdom. So how has this shaped your outlook?
Well, I will say that if I could go back in time and tell myself to do that itemized list thing right away, I think that would have made things way, way better. But I think the biggest thing I will say is not to how are we with profanity on this podcast?
I think we're going to be okay with that. So
okay, well, I'm not gonna drop F-bombs and stuff like that, but it's like don't half-ass things in your first ever. Don't have half-ass things ever. Exactly. Especially in your first year, because the later years are going to rely on your first and second year experiences to have not half-assed things, because you're going to want to build on that stuff. Right. And so there were so many times in my later grad school career where I was looking at some data or some coding things that I had done, and I'm like, what? Who wrote this? Yeah. Who did this?
Not us, no.
Yeah, couldn't be me. Yeah, but no, I think it, like, if I would have put in that extra like hour or so, or however much of effort to like make that annotated bibliography better, or to like write down what I did and why here, as opposed to just doing some work and then like forgetting about it and like coming back later and it's like, what did I do here? Where do I pick up?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Organization is crucial with that. You know, so many times I've looked back and I'm like, what was I doing? But I think when you're trying to you have all these competing things, right, that you're trying to juggle, it makes it hard, right, to say like super organized, like how you normally would be.
Right. Organized, write and record everything, even if it seems unnecessary. This is from my PI, and she said back up everything because she had run into issues of things getting deleted entirely from her PCs and stuff like that. And thankfully it didn't happen to me, but yeah, I do have like digital copies on the cloud, and then like hard drives and stuff like that.
It's so important to back things up because you never know when technology will fail us. And
exactly.
All right. So the next question. So doubt kills more dreams, as we know, than failure ever will. So could you share a moment when self-doubt crept in during your PhD journey? And then how did you overcome that self-doubt and just push forward?
I will say the most amount of doubt for my journey probably was around, there were 2 points. The first point was when I was preparing for my knowledge exam, which is basically just, do I know enough about microbiology to warrant a PhD? And so I had to study a bunch for that. And then like initially in the very, very early stages of prepping for it, I'm like, can I do this? Am I actually prepped for this? And over time, after studying, and at the time I was also getting to teach the lecture too, so I was getting to like refine my knowledge of things.
Right.
And just these interactions that I've had, that I would have with students, or just like talking with people conversationally, that I would just pull out these bits and pieces of knowledge, and then I'd be like, wait, I pulled that out. Yeah, nice.
Yeah. It's like I know my
Um,
stuff.
right, exactly. So that kind of helped me there. And then I guess the other part was in the later part of my career, my grad school career, I would say, I wasn't like a publishing machine. It actually took a decent amount of time into my career. It was at like 3.5 years maybe before I put out any sort of like manuscript or something like that got published. Yeah. And even then, I wasn't first author on it. But then like all of it, it was very tail heavy, I'd say, in terms of like output on manuscripts and like research and stuff like that, because a lot of it lined up with finishing up the dissertation. But then like at that point, like 3.5 years in, where I had like one thing out, and then like I was like, is this really like, is this good? Should I be putting out more? Like I feel like I don't have anything to prove right now for being there for 3 years or 3.5 years and things like that.
It's the pressure too of feeling like, did I actually produce something, right? Even
exactly.
doing all these things.
Yeah. And then it was my PI who kind of like snaps me back into reality and was like, you have been doing stuff. Like, you're on a graduate teaching assistantship, so you're not on a research assistantship. You have been teaching on top of doing everything else. You've been picking up these skills, and even then, like, you haven't, even on the non-teaching side, like on the research side, you've been putting out stuff. Like, you did your exams and you did your lit review and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You've been prepping. So
right.
she was really a huge factor in making me not feel like I didn't do anything.
Yeah, see, it's so important to have that motivational force behind it, though, because it can seem like so, impossible. You're like, what am I actually doing? What's the point of all this day to day?
Right.
Yeah. Actually, that brings me to the next one. So on the topic of mentorship. So we know that a mentor, right, doesn't just teach, right? They actually help transform us. So can you describe a meaningful interaction that you've had with a mentor or colleague, and one that like actually shifted your perspective on research or academia? And then the second thing is, what advice did they offer that still resonates with you to this day?
Okay. I'm blanking on who had said it first, because this quote that I'm about to pull out has been like thrown around by so many people, because it's an incredible quote, but it is, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
And that was sprung onto me in those times of, am I really doing stuff that is worthwhile? And because at the time I'd been looking at what other grad students were doing in my cohort, and the cohort like ahead of me and stuff like that. And they're all incredible students. They do such cool stuff and like incredible work. And then I'm looking at that. I'm like, can I live up to that? Like, do I need to do that? And well, whoever had thrown that quote out at me first, whether it was my PI or one of my peers, they're like, don't compare yourself to others. Yeah. You're gonna be disappointed. Everybody works at their own pace. Everybody has their own challenges and hurdles and gets to where they are differently. And so this person might be like super hyper passionate about their work, that they're willing to put in like 80 hours a week to do that stuff. And that's okay for them if they enjoy that, and that's their super passion. But
it's an individual case by case basis, and like what you're actually sacrificing, right? In terms of like relationships, all these other things,
Exactly. If it's like, if that person's 20% is my like 80%, that's okay. That's fine. All that matters is what I what I do, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But the social comparison thing, that's like so prominent. I feel like everybody at some point in a PhD program, like we do
Yeah.
that, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So for now, we have for those considering a doctorate in your field, what insights or guidance would you share with them? So just imagine people coming in, right, to get a PhD. What would you give for tips? And are there like any specific skills, mindsets, or like preparations that might be like a non-negotiable for success?
Be prepared for failure and uncertainty, I think, are the biggest things that I can say. Because with a PhD and with the research that it entails, you're pursuing things that no one else pursues. You don't know if it's going to work out, if it does at all. And so, be prepared to smash your head against the wall and be met with just things that seem like insurmountable challenges. But because it's hard. It's definitely not like med school is hard, so I'm going to just go do a PhD. No, they're both hard. They're both very, very hard. PhD is just an entirely, they're different.
And there's like the funding, right? There's like so many different aspects to it, right? It's not just, studying and knowing and being an expert, right? In the particular area, it's like funding. How can I fund this research? Everything.
Right. And then it's when you mentioned that, it brings me to stories that I hear of grad students who, they get accepted in the program and they're working and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden their PI runs out of funding. And then all of a sudden what happens then?
Right.
Do they secure their own funding, or like there have been situations where like the PI just up and leaves, whether that's because they're leaving academia or they're going to a different institution and they can't bring the grad student with. And so there is some amount of chaos that is not uncommon, I would say.
Oh yeah. And then you have to adapt, right? Or maybe like give up the dream and then pursue it a different way.
Right. So being adaptable too is huge.
Yeah. I would say that's like so important though, adaptability, because you never know what, like you said, is going to hit you. So you have to be prepared for like anything and everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this kind of brings me to like the whole sense of community, right? Like, I feel like it's so easy to just say, oh yeah, I'm in isolation. I'm a PhD student, right? I'm an island, but we know that it's so much more than that. And community is essential, right? So how did collaboration, if it did, influence your research findings? Do you think that like teamwork is vital for like these breakthroughs that we have in science? Maybe in the research that you've done, do you feel like collaboration played a big role in that?
I will say that, well, yes, collaboration did play a huge role in it, because it was so much more helpful having at least one other person to like go through this stuff with me, whether that was another grad student in the lab or like an undergrad that was helping us out. But like if it was like a statistical analysis or something like that we both had to learn, it was nice having someone else to like also be like, what is going on? How do we do this?
Right.
And then having that shared like, oh, that's so cool.
It's the insight like moment. Yeah.
Right. Or like just any other bits and pieces that we can bring to the table that will help each other out. I'd say that that's huge. And while I am sure that there is a world where I probably could have done that myself, it was so much better having at least one other person there. And there wasn't just one other person there. It was the entire lab group. It was my cohort in the program. But yeah, it was.
Oh, yeah. That just brings me back to like statistics. Like I took so many stats courses and we had this like HLM class, hierarchical linear modeling. And I was just struggling through like different problems, and like having that support was essential, right? To like understand what we're actually doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. So yeah, with that, right? So reflecting on like the highs and the lows, right, that one encounters in your like PhD journey, is there like a particular achievement that stands out to you? Like something that you take a lot of pride in, and yours is more recent than mine is.
Yeah.
So is there something that like in your journey happened and you're like, wow, I'm still to this day so proud of this?
There are, is it selfish for me to think of 3 moments here?
No, all the
Okay.
moments. Take pride in everything.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So one, obviously, it was defending the PhD and graduating. That is, it's what I set out to do, right? So
Yeah.
just having accomplished that is so incredibly cool for me. But the 2 other moments I will say are, well, maybe there's 4 total. But one of them was relatively recently, and it was kind of like a make or break moment for me in this in my PhD, because
Yeah.
essentially it was, if I don't get past this hurdle, it's, I mean, that's it. That's all she wrote. Like, I have to get over this hurdle in order to graduate, in order to defend, and that hurdle was getting my PhD or my dissertation written up and sent to my PI by a certain time in the summer, in order to turn around the edits and then make sure that it's all nice for the defense. So that was a hard deadline. But that make or break moment was important to me because throughout my career, my PI had picked up on the fact that when I'm given soft deadlines, which in grad school there are a decent handful of them.
That's true.
When I'm given soft deadlines, I kind of shift back to my procrastination mode. And that isn't, well, it's not healthy at all. And so, like, this hard deadline of like, you either you're gonna make it or you're not, was kind of like the moment where I said to myself, like, this is where you can prove, like, this is where you prove yourself.
Right.
You do this, then like there's no self-doubt anymore at all. And so obviously that it happened. I met the deadline. Yeah, I'm here. That was actually the second of the 2 make or break moments I'll say that I had in the PhD career, because there was that one, and then the one before it was actually right before ASMQ, so the American Society for Microbiology conference.
And that's actually where we met at. Yeah. Yep.
Right, in Phoenix. But it was the weeks leading up to that, because I had to get the poster ready for that. But then I also had edits for a manuscript that we had to turn around for Frontiers in Education, which is huge for me, because it's Frontiers in Education.
It's one of the big ones.
Yeah, but it's the turnaround time was like, oh yeah, get back to us in 2 weeks, and we're like, 2 weeks is when like the conference is, and so like things were lining up in a way that it was absolute chaos. And then again, my PI at the time, my PI was like, yeah, you get through this, you can get through anything.
It's true. Yep.
So again, obviously I got through that, but that was another bit of chaos where like I had to like hunker down, head down, and just get work done.
Yeah.
And there were no excuses, no procrastination, and it basically went down to the wire for that. And then I had a great time at ASNQ and stuff like that, and so things worked out.
You seem to be great mental health though at the conference. Like, you were doing great. So
yeah, well, because I had gotten all of that other stuff done. But the other thing was leading up to that conference. There was an international talk that JMBE had invited myself and my PI to, based off of a manuscript that we had put out relatively recently. And that was one of the things on my PI's like career bucket list, is to give an international talk, and we got invited to it, and it was super cool. She's like, there are faculty in our department who still don't have that checked off yet on their bucket list, and you just knocked that out as a grad student. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. That's
something to be proud of, though. It's like all those accomplishments.
Yeah, and then funnily enough, too, with that invitation to speak, they had also extended an invitation to ASMQ, even though the deadline for the abstract had passed. They were like, do you want to present the stuff at ASMQ too?
Oh, wow.
We can completely ignore like the deadline for the abstract. Just send an abstract in, and then we'll get you put in for a slot. And I'm like,
That's when you know
Yeah,
it's
let's
good.
do it. Right. And then I'm like, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And
See,
so those I think are the highlights for my career.
just in the way you're describing it though, like it brings back so much for me too, though, like those moments, you can just see the joy in your face. Like I
Yeah.
resonate with that so deeply because I've been through that too.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing I wanted to ask was if you can just tell us a little bit about like your postdoc, journey so far. I know it's just started, but you're the first postdoc that we have on the show. So do you
Sure.
feel like there's like unique challenges maybe associated with being a postdoc, like coming right out of your PhD? Like, do you want to tell us a little bit about your thoughts on it, on that?
Yeah. So grad school, I will say was like, in a way, it was undergrad too, right?
Yeah.
Because like a lot of the schedule you made yourself, and so the flexibility, like going from high school to undergrad, like you opened up some more flexibility, and then even more so like going into grad school. But then like going into postdocing, I feel like kind of, at least from my experience, it has reined me in a little bit, because now I'm treated as an employee now.
Right.
I have a schedule. I have a certain amount of PTO and time off and stuff like that in the
You're
year
an
that I have to
adult.
like. Yeah, I know. I'm a big kid now. Yeah, so I have to request time off and stuff like that, and so like I only get a certain amount of time off per year. Whereas in grad school, it was like, um, if I knew ahead of time that my family was going on a vacation and I'd let my PI know, and she'd be like, okay, do you think you'll get work done? And I'm like, yeah, I can get work done. And she'd
Right.
be like, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as long as I got my work done, then yeah, that's there. But then with this, it's like, if I'm going to be gone, it's like I have to put in the request and I have to stay within my constraints of
Yeah.
how many days I'm allotted and things like that
Exactly.
too. And that's not even taking into consideration that my postdoc opportunity, it's 50% extension, which is, from my understanding, relatively unique to postdoc.
Yeah. From what I
Uh,
know too.
right, postdoc experiences, because a lot of the time it's either like a research heavy postdoc fellowship or like a teaching heavy postdoc fellowship. But because this is extension, I'm doing a lot of outreach and working with local communities and things like that, which is something that I'm actually super excited about. But also, it's
Yeah.
like there's that level of uncertainty because I haven't had that much exposure to it. I'd say I did a lot of like outreach and then like Science Olympiad and helping out like with workshops and stuff like that for K-12 students. But this is an entirely different beast, I will say.
It seems
Because
great though. You can like use like your education background though,
right,
and like
I'm picking
incorporate
up
that with
I'm
it.
picking up these skills and to be able to translate like science and all things agriculture, microbiology, biotechnology to these different audiences, like kids, like K-12, and even adults too, like on the other side of the spectrum there. So like
Yeah.
it's a crazy experience that I it's gonna be a process to learn and get used to, but it's definitely something that I'm like super excited about to be
That's
able to say
awesome.
that I have that in my skill set.
Exactly. Do you know like what steps like you would want to do like after the postdoc, like when you're done with it eventually, like one day, do you want to go into academia, like industry? Do you have any ideas for like which road, like which
I,
path you want to take?
right. I think at the end of the day, it's as long as it's teaching, I will be satisfied. And so whether that's a tenured position, whether that's just a professor of practice position at a university, and then trying to like hold on to that as long as possible, not necessarily having the job security of like a tenured faculty, but like as long as I do a really good job, and then like people
Yeah.
like me, like hopefully like that works out. What I will say is that with like tenured positions, I'm not a huge fan of the whole publish or perish mentality, and I don't want to be pressured to just be a publication machine, right?
Right.
I want to actually like sit down and enjoy things,
You
not
could
just in a
wind up like me though at a teaching focused institution, right? Where
right,
it's like it's 60% where we're
that too,
actually teaching in the classroom and mentoring.
right. And
That's
I will say
exciting
that,
though.
yeah, like what I mean, like obviously, like there are tenured track faculty or tenured faculty that love doing that and love putting out research and also teaching and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
that's great. I
It's
don't
all
know
about everybody what they want, their own
exactly,
respective needs.
exactly, yeah. I just
All
want to
right.
teach.
Yeah. See, there you go. You know what you like to do. That's important,
Right.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Like, we so
Yeah.
appreciate you like talking about your experiences and like diving deep into your doctoral journey. So thank you for spending the time with us.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Of course.